The first crack of thunder shook Willow Jensen to her very core. But it wasn't the sound that frightened her. It was the knowledge that her small homestead on the outskirts of Benton Creek, Texas, couldn't withstand what was coming. The year was 1874, and the hurricane sweeping in from the Gulf of Mexico cared nothing for the life she'd painstakingly built over the past 2 years. Willow pressed her face against the window, her honey-blonde hair falling in waves around her shoulders as she watched the sky turn a sickening shade of green. At 24, she had already weathered more than most, losing her parents to fever, traveling alone from Boston to Texas, and establishing herself as the town's only female apothecary. But nothing had prepared her for the ferocity of a Texas hurricane. The winds had already torn shutters from neighboring properties and sent chickens flying across yards. Debris tumbled down the dirt road like possessed tumbleweed, and trees bent at unnatural angles. Her little wooden house, with its fresh white paint and blue trim, stood vulnerable against nature's fury. "Please hold," she whispered, pressing a palm against the wall as if her touch could somehow strengthen it. The storm had arrived faster than anyone had predicted. Most townsfolk had evacuated inland, but Willow had stayed behind to gather her precious medicinal herbs and remedies, her livelihood, her passion. The first window shattered with such violence that glass sprayed across her small sitting room. Willow screamed, ducking behind a chair as the wind invaded her sanctuary, tossing papers and toppling furniture. The next crash came from above, the sound of her roof beginning to tear away. Rain poured in, instantly soaking everything. Willow grabbed her medicine bag and rushed toward the root cellar door, her only hope for shelter. The house groaned and shifted around her as she struggled with the wooden door in the floor. Just as she pulled it open, a terrible cracking sound split the air. Willow looked up to see her ceiling separating, revealing the violent sky above. With a scream, she tumbled down the cellar steps as her home began to collapse inward. The last thing she remembered was the deafening roar of wind and the crushing weight of something hard against her leg before darkness claimed her. Miles away, Ethan Jameson adjusted his hat against the driving rain as he urged his exhausted horse forward. At 32, the rancher had seen his share of Texas storms, but this hurricane had materialized with a vengeance that surprised even him. He'd been returning from delivering cattle in Houston when the storm hit, forcing him to seek the fastest route home to check on his ranch hands and livestock. His route took him past Benton Creek, a town he normally avoided. Too many memories lingered there, ghosts of his past that he preferred not to face. But the main roads were flooded, leaving him little choice but to cut through on the old trail that passed the outskirts of town. Lightning illuminated the path ahead, revealing a scene of devastation. Trees uprooted, fences destroyed, and entire structures reduced to kindling. The worst seemed to have passed, but the aftermath was only beginning to reveal itself in the gray dawn light. Ethan's keen eyes spotted something unusual among the wreckage of what had once been a modest house. A splash of blue fabric amid the brown mud and gray timber. He reined his horse to a stop and dismounted, his boots sinking into the sodden earth as he approached cautiously. "Hello," he called, his voice nearly lost in the persistent rain. "Anyone there?" A faint moan answered him, so soft he almost missed it. Ethan moved faster now, pulling away splintered boards and broken furniture. The blue fabric belonged to a woman's dress, and its owner lay half buried in the remnants of what appeared to be a root cellar. Her face was pale beneath streaks of mud, but she was breathing. Blonde hair tangled around her shoulders, and Ethan realized with a start that he recognized her, the herb woman from town, the one who had arrived a couple of years back. He'd seen her once or twice in passing, but their paths had rarely crossed. "Miss, can you hear me?" He gently touched her shoulder. Relieved when her eyelids fluttered, Willow struggled toward consciousness, pain radiating from her leg and head. Through blurred vision, she saw a man's face, weathered but handsome, with concerned hazel eyes beneath the brim of a worn cowboy hat. Rain dripped from his dark brown hair and a scar bisected one eyebrow. "My house," she whispered hoarsely. "It's gone, madam," he said, his voice deep and gentle. "But you're alive, and that's what matters. I need to get you somewhere safe. Can you tell me if anything's broken?" Willow tried to move and gasped as pain shot through her right leg. "My leg," she managed. "I think it's broken." Ethan nodded grimly. "I'll need to splint that before we move you far. First, let me get you out of this rain." With careful movements, he cleared more debris and assessed her injuries. Her leg was indeed broken, but cleanly from what he could tell. A gash on her forehead had bled freely, but was already clotting. Bruises covered her arms and shoulders, but miraculously, she had survived the house's collapse. Using pieces of broken furniture, Ethan fashioned a crude splint for her leg. His hands were strong but surprisingly gentle, and Willow found herself watching his face as he worked. Lines of concentration formed between his brows, and despite her pain, she noted how his rain-soaked shirt clung to broad shoulders. "I'm Ethan Jameson," he said as he secured the splint with strips torn from his bandana. "I have a ranch about 5 miles from here." "Willow Jensen," she replied, wincing. "I'm the herb woman, I know." He offered a small smile that transformed his serious face. "You helped my ranch hand last year when he had that poisoned wound." She nodded, surprised he remembered. "Your foreman, Miguel, how is he?" "Good as new, thanks to you." Ethan looked around at the destruction. "Was anyone else with you?" "No, just me." Willow felt a wave of despair as she surveyed what remained of her home. "Everything I had was here." Ethan followed her gaze, understanding the devastation of losing one's livelihood. "We need to get you to a doctor. The town's probably in bad shape, but Doc Wilson's place is sturdy. He might still be there." "If you could just help me to town, I can." "Madam Willow," Ethan interrupted, "you're not walking anywhere on that leg. I'm going to carry you to my horse, and we're going to find you proper medical attention." Before she could protest, he slid one arm beneath her knees and another around her back, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Willow gasped, both from pain and the unexpected proximity to this man she barely knew. His warmth contrasted sharply with the cold rain, and despite herself, she found her arm instinctively circling his neck for support. "My medicine bag," she said suddenly. "Please, it's all I have left." Ethan paused, looking around until he spotted a leather satchel partially buried in mud. Carefully balancing Willow, he bent to retrieve it, then carried her to his patient horse. "This is Samson," Ethan said, somehow managing to lift her into the saddle while supporting her injured leg. "He's steady as they come." He mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist as he took the reins with his free hand. Willow sat stiffly at first, uncomfortable with the intimacy of their position, but as pain and exhaustion overtook her, she found herself leaning back against his chest. "Hold on," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "It's not far." They rode slowly through the devastation toward Benton Creek. The town had fared somewhat better than the outlying homesteads, with many of the sturdier buildings still standing. The streets were littered with debris, and townspeople were already emerging to assess damage. Doc Wilson's office was intact, but the handwritten sign on the door made Willow's heart sink. "Gone to help at church shelter." The town church, which sat on higher ground, had been designated as the emergency shelter before the storm. "We'll try the church," Ethan said, turning Samson around. The church was overcrowded with displaced townspeople. Doc Wilson, a gray-haired man in his 60s, moved among the injured with barely contained exhaustion. When he saw Willow in Ethan's arms, he directed them to a pew that had been cleared for patients. "Broken leg, cuts and bruises," Ethan reported as he gently laid her down. "Found her in what's left of her house outside town." Doc Wilson nodded grimly. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Jensen. I'll get to you as soon as I can." Ethan hesitated, looking around at the chaos. "I need to check on my ranch, but—" He glanced down at Willow, unexpected concern in his eyes. "Go," she said, managing a small smile despite her pain. "Your people need you. I'll be fine here." He nodded, but still seemed reluctant. "I'll come back to check on you," he promised, surprising both of them. Then, with a tip of his hat, he was gone. Willow watched him leave, a strange emptiness settling over her that had nothing to do with her injuries or lost home. She hardly knew the man, yet his absence felt significant somehow. Hours passed before Doc Wilson finally reached her. By then, the pain in her leg had become a throbbing constant, and exhaustion had settled into her bones. "That cowboy did a decent job with this splint," the doctor commented as he examined her leg. "But we'll need to set this properly. It's going to hurt, Miss Jensen." Willow nodded, bracing herself. "I understand." The pain of having her leg set was excruciating, and she couldn't hold back her cries. Doc Wilson worked efficiently, his experienced hands making quick work of applying a proper splint with wooden boards and clean bandages. "You'll need to stay off this for at least 6 weeks," he instructed. "And even then, you'll need a crutch for a while after." Reality crashed over Willow like a second hurricane. 6 weeks of immobility, no home to recover in, no income from her apothecary work. Her carefully constructed independence lay in ruins, just like her house. "Doctor," she began hesitantly, is there a place here where I might stay while I recover? I can help with the wounded, even from a bed. I know my herbs," and the doctor's sympathetic expression stopped her. "We're overwhelmed, Miss Jensen. The church will serve as shelter for a few days at most, but then, well, everyone will need to find arrangements with family or friends." Willow looked away, blinking back tears. She had neither family nor close friends in Benton Creek. She had always kept to herself, focused on establishing her business rather than forming connections. "I understand," she said quietly. "Perhaps someone will need nursing help in exchange for lodging." Doc Wilson patted her hand. "We'll figure something out. For now, rest." But rest wouldn't come. As night fell, the church grew quieter, but Willow remained awake, staring at the ceiling, calculating her limited options. She could write to a distant cousin in Boston, but that would take weeks. She had a small amount saved, but not enough for lodging and food while she healed. Just before dawn, the church door opened, and a familiar silhouette appeared against the gray light. Ethan Jameson moved quietly through the rows of sleeping people, his eyes searching until they found her. Willow felt a peculiar flutter in her chest as he approached. He crouched beside her pew, hat in hand. His clothes were different, clean and dry, but he looked exhausted. "How are you faring?" he asked softly. "Better, thank you. The doctor set my leg properly." She studied his face. "Your ranch," a shadow crossed his features. "Lost some fencing and a storage barn. 2 horses spooked and ran off. But the main house and most of the stock survived." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about your situation." Willow tensed. "I'll manage somehow." "I've no doubt," he said, with unexpected respect in his voice. "But I have a proposition that might benefit us both. My housekeeper, Mrs. Ramirez, left last month to care for her daughter's new baby in San Antonio. I need someone to manage the household, and you need a place to recover." Willow stared at him, struggling to understand. You're offering me a job as your housekeeper. With this, she gestured to her splinted leg. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, seeming almost embarrassed. Not exactly, more of an arrangement. You'd oversee the household menus, supplies, directing the ranch hands who help with heavier chores. In exchange, you'd have room and board while you heal and wages besides. Why would you do this for a stranger? Willow asked, suspicion edging into her voice. Ethan met her gaze directly. You're not entirely a stranger. Your remedies saved Miguel's arm, maybe his life. And he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I know what it's like to lose everything and have nowhere to turn. Something in his tone made Willow believe him. Still, she hesitated. Going to a remote ranch with a man she barely knew wasn't without risk. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan continued. Mrs. Ramirez's quarters would be yours, a separate wing of the house with its own entrance. My sister visits often from Austin, and you'd be free to leave whenever you choose, with transportation back to town. The offer was generous, suspiciously so. But as Willow considered her alternatives, she realized they were virtually non-existent. I can also continue my apothecary work there, she asked. I saved my medicine bag and some herbs. Ethan nodded. I've a garden plot you can use when you're able, and I'm sure the hands would appreciate having someone with medical knowledge nearby. Then I accept, Willow said, making her decision, but only until I can rebuild or find another arrangement in town. A hint of a smile touched Ethan's lips. Agreed. I'll return tomorrow with a wagon to transport you comfortably. True to his word, Ethan arrived the next day with a wagon padded with blankets and pillows. Doc Wilson helped Willow outside, giving Ethan detailed instructions for her care. Change the bandages daily. Watch for fever or unusual pain. Keep her off that leg. The doctor handed over a pair of wooden crutches. She can start using these in a week or so for very short distances. The journey to the Jameson ranch was slow and jarring despite Ethan's efforts to avoid rough patches in the road. Willow learned that the property, which he called Cottonwood Ranch, had been in his family for 3 generations. He ran it with the help of 8 ranch hands, raising cattle and horses. And you live there alone, besides the workers? Willow asked, curious about the man who had so suddenly become her benefactor. Ethan's expression closed slightly. Yes, just me in the main house. I was married once, but she passed 6 years ago. I'm sorry, Willow said softly, recognizing the grief that still shadowed his words. Life goes on, he replied simply, then changed the subject. Tell me about your apothecary work. How did a Boston woman learn such skills? Grateful for the shift in conversation, Willow explained how her mother had been known for her herbal remedies, skills passed down through generations. When both parents died from influenza, Willow had decided to start fresh somewhere new, somewhere her knowledge might be needed. Texas seemed as good a place as any, she concluded. Different plants grow here, but the principles are the same. I've been learning from local healers, including a Comanche woman who visits town occasionally. Ethan looked impressed. Most settlers won't go near the natives, let alone learn from them. Healing transcends such differences, Willow said. Plants don't care who picks them, and bodies don't care who provides the medicine that heals them. By the time they arrived at Cottonwood Ranch, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the property. The ranch house was larger than Willow had expected, a sprawling 1-story structure of stone and wood with a wide porch wrapping around it. Outbuildings dotted the landscape, and beyond them stretched fenced pastures where horses and cattle grazed. Despite her resolve to maintain professional distance, Willow couldn't help but be impressed. This is beautiful. It's home, Ethan said simply, but pride tinged his voice. He brought the wagon directly to a side entrance. "These are Mrs. Ramirez's quarters, yours now." With surprising gentleness, he lifted Willow from the wagon and carried her inside. The quarters consisted of a comfortable bedroom, a small sitting room, and a private washroom, luxury compared to her destroyed cottage. "The main house is through that door," Ethan explained, setting her carefully on the bed. "Kitchen's the first room you'll enter. I've asked Carmen, one of the hands' wives, to help you get settled and assist with anything you need." As if summoned, a plump, friendly-faced Mexican woman appeared in the doorway. "Senor Jameson, I have prepared everything as you asked." "Thank you, Carmen. This is Miss Jensen. She'll be managing the household while she recovers." Carmen smiled warmly at Willow. "Welcome, Miss Jensen. I have drawn a bath for you and laid out some clothes. They belong to Senora Ramirez, but she said to use them if needed." Ethan excused himself, leaving Willow in Carmen's capable hands. The bath was heavenly after days of discomfort, and though Mrs. Ramirez's clothes were too large, they were clean and soft. By the time Carmen helped her back to bed and brought a tray of stew and fresh bread, Willow was almost convinced she'd made the right decision in coming here. "Senor Jameson is a good man," Carmen said as she helped arrange pillows to elevate Willow's injured leg. "He works hard and treats everyone fairly. His wife's death left him very alone, I think." Willow's curiosity stirred, but she hesitated to pry. "How did she die, if I may ask?" "Childbirth," Carmen said sadly. "The baby, too. It broke something in him, though he never speaks of it." Willow's heart ached at the revelation. Such loss would change anyone. It explained the shadow she sometimes saw cross his face, the careful distance he maintained. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "I'll be mindful of it." Carmen nodded approvingly. "Rest now. Tomorrow is soon enough to begin your duties." The first week at Cottonwood Ranch passed in a blur of pain, boredom, and gradual adjustment. True to his word, Ethan left Willow largely to herself, checking in briefly each morning but otherwise occupied with ranch work. Carmen came daily to help with personal needs and heavier chores, while Willow began managing the household from her bed, creating menus and supply lists. By the second week, she had graduated to using crutches for short distances, allowing her to explore her quarters and the kitchen. The ranch hands treated her with respectful distance, though Miguel, whose arm she had saved, always greeted her with special warmth. It was during her third week at the ranch that Willow's and Ethan's careful orbits began to intersect more frequently. It started when she found his medical supplies woefully inadequate while treating a ranch hand's minor burn. That evening she waited in the kitchen until Ethan came in from the fields. He stopped short seeing her at the table, crutches leaned against a nearby chair. "Miss Jensen, is something wrong?" "Not exactly wrong," she said, "but your medical supplies need improvement. If I'm to be useful here beyond household management, I'll need certain herbs and materials." Instead of dismissing her concern, Ethan pulled out a chair and sat opposite her. "Make a list. I'll send someone to town tomorrow." Surprised by his easy acquiescence, Willow pushed forward a list she'd already prepared. Ethan reviewed it thoughtfully, asking questions about items he didn't recognize. "This is comprehensive," he noted. "You really know your craft." "It's more than a craft to me," she replied. "It's a calling." He studied her for a moment, as if seeing her anew. "Like ranching is for me, passed down through generations, but also chosen." This unexpected moment of understanding shifted something between them. From that evening forward, Ethan began taking his evening meals with Willow in the kitchen rather than alone in his study. Their conversations, initially focused on ranch business, gradually expanded to include personal histories and philosophies. Willow learned that Ethan had fought briefly for the Confederacy. more out of regional loyalty than ideological commitment, and had returned disillusioned to rebuild the ranch his father had neglected. He had met his late wife, Sarah, shortly after, and their marriage had been brief but happy before tragedy struck. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston's middle class, her father a printer and her mother an unofficial midwife and healer. She described her journey west alone, the challenges of establishing herself in a town suspicious of independent women, and her gradual acceptance as her remedies proved effective. "Why did you really help me?" she asked one evening, a month into her stay. The truth this time. Ethan considered her question, twirling a fork absently between his fingers. "When I found you in that wreckage, something shifted. I couldn't just ride away." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "And maybe I recognized something in you, the determination to stand alone, even when it's harder than accepting help." "Is that what you do? Stand alone when help is available?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "According to my sister, yes, relentlessly." "She sounds wise," Willow said, smiling. "Annoyingly so," Ethan agreed. "You'll meet her soon. She's arriving next week for her monthly visit." The prospect of meeting Ethan's sister brought an unexpected flutter of nervousness. Willow had begun to care what this family thought of her, a realization that was both comforting and alarming. Ethan Jameson arrived with the energy of a whirlwind, her resemblance to her brother striking despite her feminine features and voluminous skirts. She embraced Willow without hesitation, as if they were already friends. "So you're the miracle worker who's got my brother taking meals at a proper table instead of hunched over his desk," she declared. "I'd have invited you years ago had I known." "Eleanor," Ethan warned, but his tone held more affection than annoyance. "Oh, hush," his sister replied. "Miss Jensen deserves to know she's accomplished the impossible." Willow found herself instantly drawn to Eleanor's direct manner and genuine warmth. Over the next few days, the women spent hours together while Ethan tended to ranch business. Eleanor helped Willow in the garden she'd started outside her quarters, where she was cultivating medicinal herbs to replace those lost in the hurricane. "My brother watches you when you're not looking," Eleanor remarked casually as they sorted seedlings. "I haven't seen that look on his face since Sarah." Willow nearly dropped the delicate comfrey plant she was holding. "I'm sure you're mistaken. I'm just his employee." Eleanor's knowing smile was infuriating. "If you say so, dear, but I know my brother, and I see how your eyes follow him too." "My leg is healing well," Willow said, desperately changing the subject. "Another few weeks and I'll be able to return to town." "And is that what you want?" Eleanor asked, suddenly serious. To leave all this behind, the question haunted Willow long after Eleanor departed. Was that what she wanted? To return to town, rebuild her solitary existence, leave behind the comfort and connection she'd found at Cottonwood Ranch, leave Ethan. She had begun to rely on their evening conversations, to watch for his return from the fields, to take pleasure in his rare but transformative smiles. Somewhere between being rescued from the wreckage of her home and now, Willow had developed feelings for the reserved rancher that went far beyond gratitude. The realization terrified her. She had built her life around self-reliance, and her heart had remained carefully guarded. Opening it now seemed dangerous, especially to a man still haunted by his past. Ethan, for his part, found himself increasingly drawn to Willow's presence. Her intelligence, her compassion for others, her quiet strength all reminded him that there was more to life than work and obligation. When she laughed, something long dormant stirred within him. When she spoke of her passion for healing, he recognized a dedication that matched his own love for the land. But he kept these thoughts to himself, convinced that Willow's eventual departure was inevitable. She was a healer, needed by many. She valued her independence, and he had nothing to offer but a heart still scarred by loss. The turning point came unexpectedly, nearly 2 months after the hurricane. One of the ranch hands galloped into the yard, shouting for help. His 10-year-old son had been thrown from a horse and wasn't moving. Ethan burst into Willow's quarters without knocking. "Pedro's boy is hurt. Badly. Doc Wilson is delivering a baby in town. Can you help me to him?" Willow said immediately, reaching for her crutches and medicine bag. They found the boy, Manuel, laid carefully on a blanket in the shade of an oak tree. His small body was still, one arm bent at an unnatural angle, blood seeping from a wound on his temple. Pedro and his wife Maria knelt beside him, terror evident on their faces. Willow lowered herself to the ground, setting aside her crutches. "Tell me exactly what happened," she instructed as her hands gently examined the child. "He was riding Thunder, too big a horse for him, but he begged," Pedro explained, voice breaking. "The snake spooked Thunder and Manuel. He flew through the air like a bird, but landed like a stone." Willow worked methodically, checking for broken bones beyond the obvious arm fracture, assessing the head wound, monitoring breathing and pulse. The boy was unconscious but alive. The greatest dangers were the head injury and potential internal bleeding. "We need to move him inside where I can treat him properly," she said. "Ethan, can you carry him?" very carefully, supporting his neck. For the next several hours, Willow fought for Manuel's life, applying her knowledge of herbs, setting his broken arm, cleaning and stitching his head wound, and preparing poultices to reduce swelling. Ethan remained by her side throughout, fetching water, grinding herbs as directed, holding the boy still when necessary. Night fell, and still Manuel remained unconscious. Pedro and Maria took turns sitting with their son while Willow monitored his breathing and pulse. In the quieter moments, she caught Ethan watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "You're remarkable," he said softly when they were momentarily alone. "The way you work, so certain and calm." "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Head injuries are unpredictable. All we can do is wait." Ethan's hand found hers, warm and steady. "Then we'll wait together." That simple touch, that promise of shared vigil, broke something open between them. When Willow swayed with exhaustion, Ethan guided her to a chair without releasing her hand. When worry clouded her face, he squeezed her fingers reassuringly. And when Manuel finally stirred near dawn, blinking in confusion but very much alive, their shared relief manifested in an embrace neither had planned. Willow found herself in Ethan's arms, her face pressed against his chest, his heartbeat strong beneath her ear. His arms encircled her completely, one hand cradling the back of her head with unexpected tenderness. The embrace lasted only moments before they remembered themselves and stepped apart, but something fundamental had changed. The boy's recovery over the following days was slow but steady. Willow split her time between caring for Manuel and her regular duties, now performed without crutches as her leg had healed enough for careful walking. Ethan found reasons to join her during Manuel's treatments, ostensibly to reassure Pedro and Maria, but Willow sensed other motivations. One evening, as Manuel slept peacefully and his grateful parents had gone to rest, Ethan walked Willow back to her quarters. The spring night was mild, stars scattered abundantly across the Texas sky. They paused on her small porch, neither quite ready to part. "Your leg seems much improved," Ethan observed, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes," Willow agreed. "Another week or two and I'll be fully recovered." The unspoken implication hung between them. She would leave soon, return to town, end whatever this was between them. Ethan's gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Benton Creek is rebuilding quickly. Miguel rode in yesterday and says they've already reconstructed half the main street. That's good to hear. Willow studied his profile, wishing she could read his thoughts. I can help you find a suitable place for a new apothecary shop, perhaps with living quarters above. He was offering practical assistance, doing the honorable thing while clearly preparing for her departure. Willow's heart sank. Had she misread everything? The shared glances, the lingering conversations, the way his touch seemed to seek hers when they worked together. That's very generous, she said stiffly. I wouldn't want to impose further on your kindness. Ethan turned to her then, frustration evident in his features. It's not kindness, Willow. Then what is it? She challenged, suddenly tired of this careful dance. I don't know, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. I only know that the thought of you leaving. He stopped, seeming unable to complete the sentence. The thought of me leaving what? Willow pressed, heart pounding. Ethan stepped closer, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes. Makes me realize how empty this place was before you came, how empty I was. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and frightening in its implications. I never planned to stay, Willow whispered. I know. His hand reached up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Just as I never planned to want someone to stay again. The touch of his fingers against her skin sent warmth cascading through her. Ethan, you don't need to say anything, he interrupted. I understand your independence, your calling. I would never ask you to give that up. But Willow heard what he wasn't saying that he wanted to ask, that he wished for her to stay, but wouldn't voice it out of respect for her choices. What if, she began carefully, there was a way I didn't have to choose, between my calling and what's growing between us? Hope flickered in his eyes. What do you mean? The people here need healing too, she said. Your ranch hands, their families, neighboring properties. I could establish my practice here, perhaps ride into town once or twice a week. You would consider that? Ethan asked, disbelief and hope mingling in his voice. I would consider many things, Willow answered, gathering her courage, if I knew I was wanted for more than my household management skills. The last barrier between them dissolved with those words. Ethan's hands came up to frame her face, his touch reverent. You are wanted, he said, his voice low and fervent. You are needed, not for what you can do, but for who you are. When his lips finally met hers, Willow felt as though everything in her life, the hurricane, the loss, the recovery, had been leading to this moment. His kiss was gentle at first, questioning, then deepening as she responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and she wound her arms around his neck, surrendering to feelings she had tried so long to deny. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching, hearts racing in tandem. Ethan's smile was wonder-filled, transforming his features in the moonlight. Stay, he whispered against her lips. Not as my housekeeper, not as my employee. Stay because we could build something beautiful together. Willow thought of her destroyed home, the loneliness of her previous life, and the fullness she had found here at Cottonwood Ranch, with Ethan. With this newfound family of ranch hands and their children, with purpose and connection. Yes, she said simply. I'll stay. Their second kiss sealed the promise. And as Ethan held her close under the Texas stars, Willow marveled at how destruction had ultimately led to creation. The hurricane had taken her shelter, but had set her on a path to find her home not in walls and a roof, but in the arms of a man who had found her in the wreckage and helped her build anew. Over the next months, Willow and Ethan's relationship deepened and strengthened. She moved from Mrs. Ramirez's quarters to the main house, though propriety was maintained with separate bedrooms, until they married that autumn in a simple ceremony beneath the cottonwood trees that gave the ranch its name. Alina served as witness. Beaming with satisfaction at the union she claimed to have predicted from the start, Willow established her healing practice in a small building Ethan had the ranch hands convert from a storage shed. It became known throughout the county as a place where both traditional and native healing methods were respected. People came from miles around for her remedies, and her reputation spread as far as Austin. Ethan watched his wife's practice flourish with pride, often remarking that the hurricane that nearly took her life had instead blown her into his. For her part, Willow sometimes touched the scar on her leg, a permanent reminder of that terrible night, and silently thanked the storm for the unexpected path it had set her upon. When their first child was born a year later, a robust boy they named Thomas, after Ethan's father, the circle of healing seemed complete. The room that had once been prepared for a child who never drew breath became filled with laughter and life. Ethan, who had once believed his heart permanently broken, found it expanded beyond measure. And on stormy nights, when thunder rattled the windows of their sturdy home, Ethan would hold Willow closer, both of them remembering the destruction that had ultimately led to their creation. What the hurricane had destroyed, they had rebuilt together, stronger than before. By their 5th anniversary, Cottonwood Ranch had grown in both size and reputation. A second child, a daughter named Mary, after Willow's mother, had joined their family. The ranch now included a small school for the workers' children, with Willow teaching basic reading and arithmetic, alongside healing arts to interested students. The town of Benton Creek had rebuilt as well, eventually constructing a proper doctor's office where Willow volunteered one day each week, working alongside Doc Wilson and training his young apprentice in herbal remedies that complemented his medical knowledge. On the morning of their anniversary, Ethan surprised Willow by taking her to a special place on the property, a gentle rise overlooking both the ranch buildings and the distant town. There, he had planted a garden of medicinal herbs surrounded by a low stone wall. "For when you need quiet," he explained, showing her the small bench placed in the shade of a young cottonwood tree. "And to mark 5 years since a hurricane brought you to me." Willow's eyes filled with tears as she took in the thoughtful gift. "It's perfect," she whispered, touching the aromatic plant, some rare and difficult to obtain, evidence of how much attention Ethan had paid to her work over the years. "I have something for you too," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach with a meaningful smile. Ethan's eyes widened, joy spreading across his features. "Truly," she nodded, laughing as he lifted her and spun her around before setting her carefully back on her feet, suddenly concerned. "I won't break," she assured him. "This is our 3rd journey together, remember." He nodded, cupping her face in his weathered hands, each one more precious than the last. As they stood together in the garden, the scent of healing herbs surrounding them and the future growing within her, Willow reflected on the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. From the wreckage of that terrible storm had grown a love stronger than any shelter, a family bound by choice as well as blood, and a calling that had expanded rather than diminished. The hurricane had destroyed her only shelter, and the cowboy had found her in the wreckage. But together, they had built something far more enduring than either could have created alone, a life where healing extended beyond the physical, to mend hearts that had once believed themselves broken beyond repair.